Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. For centuries, people looked up at the stars, hoping to find a sign of life. There were endless debates, movies, and theories, but no real proof. That all changed one quiet evening in the middle of the 22nd century. On Earth, the night was calm. Scientists at a space observatory in New Zealand were going about their usual tasks, tracking space debris and monitoring signals from deep space. They never expected anything unusual. Then the signal came. At first it was just a small blip on the radar, something they had seen many times before. But this time, the pattern was different. The signal was repeating, like a code, with a structure that couldn't be random. It was too organized. The lead scientist, Dr. James Lewis, stared at his monitor, heart racing. He quickly called his team over. This is it," he said, barely able to contain his excitement. "It's coming from outside our solar system. It's not noise. It's a message." The room filled with chatter as the scientists analyzed the data. The signal was strong, but it wasn't something they could immediately understand. It wasn't any known language, but it was clear that whoever, or whatever, had sent it wanted to communicate. Within hours, the signal was transmitted to every major space agency on Earth. The news spread like wildfire, from the United States to China, from Russia to the European Union. Every country's scientists and leaders scrambled to make sense of it. The media exploded with the story. "We are not alone," screamed headlines around the world. Speculation filled the airwaves. People debated the nature of the aliens. Were they peaceful or dangerous? What did they want? As governments around the world tried to prepare for a potential encounter, one thing became clear. Humanity needed someone to speak on their behalf. But how do you communicate with beings from another world? No one had the answer yet, but they knew they had to find it soon. A global summit was called. World leaders, military officials, and top scientists met to discuss their options. The pressure was immense. Everyone feared the worst: a possible invasion, a misunderstanding that could lead to war. But there was also hope that this could be the beginning of something amazing. Cooperation with another intelligent species. The United Nations, leading the summit, suggested they form a special task force. The mission: to make first contact with the aliens and try to understand their intentions. They needed an ambassador, someone who could bridge the gap between two completely different species. The only problem was, no one knew how. In the meantime, the signal kept coming. Every day, the same message was sent, over and over. Experts worked day and night to decode it, but progress was slow. Time was running out, and people started to panic. As days passed, sightings of strange lights in the sky increased. Some said they saw alien ships hovering just outside Earth's atmosphere. There was no proof yet, but fear began to spread. It wasn't long before the first Kayan ship arrived. It appeared without warning, a massive, sleek craft that seemed to glide through space effortlessly. It didn't resemble anything humans had ever built. The ship stayed in orbit, not moving, not attacking, just watching. The world held its breath. Finally, after days of silence, the ship sent another signal. This time, it wasn't a coded message. It was a direct transmission, something clearer, something that felt like an invitation. The leaders of Earth realized there was no turning back. They had to respond. Back at the United Nations, the task force was ready to take the next step. They agreed that communication would be key. Whoever represented humanity would need to understand not just the alien language, but also their culture and mindset. It wasn't just about words. It was about making sure humanity didn't misstep, didn't cause an intergalactic disaster. One thing was certain: Earth couldn't afford to get this wrong. Whoever went to meet the aliens had to be the best humanity had to offer. Someone who could think fast, someone who could remain calm under pressure, and someone who had the courage to represent all of humankind. As the alien ship continued to hover silently in space, The eyes of the world turned to the small group of scientists, diplomats, and military leaders tasked with making the impossible decision: who would be Earth's ambassador? For now, the only thing the people of Earth could do was wait, hoping that when the time came, they would be ready. Sarah Miller sat quietly in her small apartment, staring at the news on her screen. She had been following the story of the alien contact like everyone else, but never in her wildest dreams did she think it would have anything to do with her. Sarah was a linguist, an expert in understanding and decoding languages. She had spent years working for the United Nations, helping bridge communication gaps between different cultures on Earth. But this was beyond anything she had ever imagined. Aliens. Actual aliens. Her phone buzzed on the table, breaking her thoughts. It was an official call. She hesitated for a moment before answering. Sarah Miller. A calm, authoritative voice asked. "Yes, this is Sarah," she replied. "This is General Anderson. The world's top leaders have reviewed your profile, and we'd like you to come in for a special meeting. There is something important we need to discuss with you." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She had heard rumors about the task force, the one responsible for making first contact with the Xayans. Could this really be happening? "Yes, of course. I'll be there," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. The next day, Sarah found herself in a high-security building, standing in front of a room filled with generals, scientists, and world leaders. At the head of the table sat General Anderson, a tall man with sharp features and a no-nonsense attitude. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Miller," General Anderson began. "We've been watching your work for a long time. Your skills as a linguist and diplomat are unmatched. We believe you are the best person to serve as Earth's ambassador to the Xayans." Sarah felt a wave of shock. The ambassador to an alien race. It was an honor beyond anything she had ever imagined, but it was also terrifying. "Me? Are you sure?" she asked, trying to process the news. "Yes," General Anderson said firmly. "You understand languages in a way no one else does. This is more than just talking. It's about understanding. The Xayans are unlike any species we've encountered. We need someone who can break through the barriers of culture, not just words. We believe you can do that." Sarah looked around the room. Everyone's eyes were on her, waiting for her answer. Could she really do this? Represent all of humanity in front of a species no one knew anything about? I don't know if I'm the right person," she said honestly. "I've worked with languages before, but this is something else entirely." "We have faith in you," General Anderson replied. "We'll provide you with the support and resources you need, but time is running out. The Xayan ship is still in orbit, and we believe they are waiting for us to make the next move. If we don't act soon, we risk a misunderstanding, or worse." Sarah took a deep breath. She knew the risks. If she made one mistake, it could lead to disaster. But if she succeeded, it could be the beginning of something incredible. Humanity had waited for this moment for so long. Someone had to step up. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady now. "I'll be the ambassador." The days that followed were a whirlwind. Sarah was placed under intense training. She worked with scientists, military strategists, and cultural experts, trying to learn everything she could about the Xayans. But there was so much they still didn't know. The Xayans had only sent a few signals, and while the scientists had managed to decode some basic elements of their language, it was still a mystery. The aliens used strange symbols and sounds that didn't match any human language. Sarah spent hours each day studying these symbols, trying to find patterns, to make sense of it all. But it wasn't just the language she had to understand. She had to learn about the Xayans' culture, their way of thinking, their customs, their expectations. One wrong gesture, one wrong word, and the entire mission could fall apart. As the training continued, Sarah began to feel the weight of her responsibility. Every night, she would lie in bed, thinking about what was at stake. If she failed, it could mean war. The pressure was immense, but she pushed through. knowing that humanity was counting on her. Finally, the day arrived. Sarah stood in front of the task force once again, this time wearing the official uniform of Earth's ambassador. The Xaean ship was ready for her to board. It was time to meet the aliens face to face. "You've trained well, Ms. Miller," General Anderson said, shaking her hand. "You're as ready as you'll ever be. Good luck, and remember, we're all behind you." Sarah nodded, her heart pounding. As she walked toward the shuttle that would take her to the Xaean ship, she knew there was no turning back. The future of humanity was in her hands. The shuttle was silent as it made its way toward the Xaean ship. Sarah Miller sat alone, staring out of the window. The blackness of space stretched endlessly, with only the Earth and the massive alien craft in view. Her mind raced with thoughts of what was about to happen. She had trained for this, studied for weeks, but now that the moment had come, doubt crept in. The Xaean ship loomed larger as the shuttle approached. Its surface was sleek and smooth, almost like liquid metal. It had no visible windows or markings, just a giant, silent presence hanging in space. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. This was it, the moment humanity had waited for. As the shuttle docked with the Xaean ship, a soft beep indicated that it was time for her to disembark. The hatch opened, revealing a long, dark corridor. Sarah took a deep breath and stepped inside. The walls of the ship were smooth and metallic, reflecting faint lights that seemed to come from nowhere. The air was cooler than she expected, and there was a strange, soft hum in the background. Her heart raced as she walked down the corridor, unsure of what, or who, would be waiting for her. Suddenly, the floor beneath her lit up, forming a glowing path. She followed it until she reached a large, circular room. In the center stood a tall figure, unmistakably alien. The Xaean leader, Zykor, was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. Standing over 7 feet tall, Zykor had pale, iridescent skin that shimmered in the light. His eyes were large and dark, with no visible pupils, and his body was long and slender. He wore a robe made of some material that looked like it was woven from light itself. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Sarah had rehearsed this, but now, face to face with Zykor, she wasn't sure where to begin. She took a deep breath and reminded herself of her training. "Greetings," she said slowly, her voice steady. "I am Sarah Miller, the representative of Earth. I come in peace." Zykor didn't respond immediately. He tilted his head, observing her closely. Sarah waited, the silence growing heavier with each passing second. Then, without moving his mouth, Zykor spoke directly into her mind. "Human, you come to understand." Sarah blinked, surprised by the sudden voice in her head. She had expected spoken words, but the Xaeans clearly communicated in a different way. "Yes," she replied, trying to keep her voice calm. "We want to understand each other. We believe that cooperation between our species is possible." Zykor took a step closer, his gaze never leaving her. His presence was overwhelming, but Sarah stood her ground. "Understand, or control." Zykor's voice echoed in her mind again, but this time it was sharper, more intense. "Humans seek power. We have seen this before." Sarah swallowed. She had anticipated this. The Xaeans were clearly cautious of humans, and for good reason. Humanity's history was filled with wars and conflicts, often driven by the desire for power. But Sarah wasn't here to control. She was here to build a bridge between their species. "We don't seek control," she said firmly. "We seek peace. Our world has changed. We've learned from our past mistakes. We want to build a future where our species can work together." Zykor's dark eyes seemed to search her face, as if trying to determine whether she was telling the truth. The silence stretched on again, making Sarah's pulse quicken. Was she saying the right thing? Were her words enough? Then, without warning, the room around them began to change. The walls shimmered and shifted, forming strange, glowing patterns. Sarah felt a strange pressure in her head, as if Zykor was probing her mind. It was disorienting, But she stayed focused. "Words are easy," Zykor said, his voice softer now. "Actions are truth." The patterns on the walls stopped shifting, and Sarah found herself standing in a familiar scene. It was Earth, but not just any place on Earth. It was her hometown. She saw the streets where she had grown up, the buildings, the people. How could this be? Was this a test? "Zykor," she said carefully, "what is this?" "We understand through experience," Zykor explained. "This is how we learn." Sarah realized what was happening. The Xayans didn't just communicate through words. They used memories, emotions, and experiences. This was their way of testing her sincerity. As Sarah looked around, she saw her family, her friends, moments from her life unfolding before her. The good, the bad, everything. Zykor was seeing her world, understanding what shaped her as a person, as a representative of humanity. Time seemed to stretch on as they stood there, locked in this strange mental exchange. Finally, the scene faded, and Sarah was back on the alien ship, standing in front of Zykor. He looked at her with a new expression, one that almost seemed understanding. "You speak truth," he said. "We will continue." Sarah exhaled, relief washing over her. The first step had been taken. The Xayans were willing to listen, and that was more than she could have hoped for. But as she stood there, feeling the weight of the moment, she knew this was only the beginning. There was still so much more to learn, and the path ahead would not be easy. The future of humanity and the Xayans hung in the balance, and Sarah had just taken the first step toward shaping it. Sarah Miller jolted awake, her head throbbing. The smooth, metallic walls of the Xayan ship seemed to pulse with a faint light, and a deep, unsettling hum filled the air. She blinked, trying to remember where she was. Then it hit her, the meeting with Zykor, the mental exchange. And now, this. She looked around. The room was small and cold, with no windows. It was clearly a cell. Her wrists were free, but she felt trapped. Panic rose in her chest as she tried to piece together what had happened. The last thing she remembered was Zykor accepting her words, saying they would continue to communicate. But something had gone wrong. After the mental exchange, alarms had gone off. The ship shook violently, and she had been knocked out. Now she was here, alone, with no idea what had happened to the Xayans or to her mission. Sarah stood up, rubbing her temples. She had to stay calm. She needed answers. Suddenly, a section of the wall slid open, and a familiar figure entered, Zykor. His tall, shimmering form looked just as intimidating as before, but now his expression was different. His dark eyes were filled with suspicion. "Human." Zykor's voice entered her mind again, this time sharper. "You betrayed us." Sarah's heart sank. "Betrayed? What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice shaky but determined. Zykor took a step closer. "Your people attacked. While we communicated in peace, your Earth forces sent weapons toward our ship. This was no accident." Sarah felt her blood run cold. Weapons? No, that couldn't be true. She had come in peace, and as far as she knew, Earth's leaders had agreed to the same. There had been no talk of attacks or war. Who would do something like this? "That's impossible," Sarah said, shaking her head. "I didn't know about any attack. I came here to represent peace." Zykor's eyes narrowed. "Then explain this." A holographic screen appeared beside him, showing a visual of Earth. Several missiles were locked onto the Xayan ship, their paths clear. They were seconds away from impact. Sarah's stomach churned. This was a nightmare. She had no control over the military actions of Earth, but someone had clearly decided to sabotage her mission. She had to make Zykor believe her, or the consequences could be catastrophic. "Zykor, please listen to me," she said, forcing herself to stay calm. "I had no knowledge of this. I don't know who is behind it, but it's not what humanity wants. Someone on Earth is acting outside of the mission's orders." Zykor stared at her, his alien mind trying to process her words. Sarah could feel the tension between them. If she didn't convince him, this could be the end, not just for her, but for all of humanity. "We trusted you," Zykor said, his voice a low hum in her mind. "But trust is fragile, human. You must prove that you are not a part of this betrayal." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. How could she prove it? She had no way to communicate with Earth, no way to stop the attack. But she wasn't ready to give up. She had to find a way out of this. "Give me a chance," she pleaded. "Let me prove it. I will find out who did this and stop them. But if you retaliate now, everything we've worked for will be lost. I believe in peace, Zykor. I believe that we can still make this work." Zykor remained silent for a long time. Sarah's mind raced. There had to be someone on Earth, someone in the military or government, who didn't want peace with the Khans. Maybe they saw the aliens as a threat, or maybe they were driven by fear. Whatever the reason, they had gone behind the scenes to sabotage everything. Finally, Zykor spoke again. "We will not retaliate, yet. But know this, human. If your people attack us again, there will be no mercy. You have one chance to stop this, Sarah Miller. Do not waste it." Relief flooded through Sarah, but it was short-lived. She had bought herself time, but now, the real challenge lay ahead. She had to figure out who was behind the attack and stop them before it was too late. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with sincerity. "I won't let you down." Zykor nodded slightly before turning and leaving the room. The door slid shut behind him, leaving Sarah alone once more. But now she had a new mission. She sat down on the cold floor, thinking fast. There had to be a way to communicate with Earth. Maybe the Xayans had equipment she could use. She needed to reach the right people, the ones who still wanted peace. General Anderson, perhaps. He had supported her from the beginning, and she believed he was trustworthy. Whoever had sent those missiles was trying to spark a war, but Sarah wouldn't let that happen. She was determined to find the truth and save the fragile relationship between humans and the Xayans. The fate of both species now rested on her shoulders, and Sarah knew that every second counted. Sarah Miller paced the small cell, her mind racing. The clock was ticking, and Earth's missiles were on a collision course with the Xayan ship. Zykor had given her one chance to stop the attack, but she was still trapped on the alien vessel with no way to communicate with anyone back home. She knew she couldn't waste time. If she didn't act fast, everything would fall apart. Sarah approached the door and knocked, hoping Zykor or another Xayan would hear her. A moment later, the door slid open, revealing a different Xayan, this one smaller, with silver skin and piercing blue eyes. It studied her curiously. "I need your help," Sarah said, her voice urgent. "I have to communicate with Earth immediately. I can stop the attack, but I need access to your ship's systems." The Xayan blinked slowly, considering her request. Then, without a word, it gestured for her to follow. Sarah quickly stepped out of the cell, her heart pounding with hope. This might be her only chance to save the mission. The Xayan led her through a series of corridors, the ship's smooth, metallic walls glowing faintly. Finally, they arrived at a large control room filled with strange, floating devices and holographic displays. In the center of the room stood Zykor, waiting for her. "You have a solution." Zykor's voice filled her mind. Sarah nodded. "Yes, but I need to send a message to Earth. I can't let them know directly, or whoever is behind the attack will intercept it. I need to send a secure, hidden signal to someone I trust." Zykor stared at her for a long moment before gesturing toward a panel. "You may use our communication systems, but understand this. If you fail, there will be no more chances." "I understand," Sarah said, her voice steady. "I won't fail." She stepped up to the panel and stared at the strange symbols. The Xayans had technology far beyond anything Earth had ever seen. Sarah quickly realized she wouldn't be able to use it as a human would. But she didn't need to. She just needed to send a basic signal. Taking a deep breath, she activated the panel and began typing in coordinates. Her target was General Anderson, the only person in the Earth government she could fully trust. She had no idea if he was aware of the attack, but she had to believe he was still on her side. The message she sent was simple: stop the missiles. Sabotage within Earth forces. Trust me. Seconds later, the signal disappeared into space, bound for Earth. Sarah exhaled slowly, hoping it would reach General Anderson in time. Now all she could do was wait. Back on Earth, General Anderson sat in the command center, watching the screen with growing concern. The Xayan ship was still in orbit, and tensions were running high. His gut told him something wasn't right. Just then, a small alert flashed on his personal monitor. It was a secure, encrypted message, one that only a few people knew how to send. His eyes widened when he saw Sarah Miller's name attached to it. He quickly read the message and felt a surge of panic. Sabotage, Anderson muttered under his breath. Who could have? Without wasting a second, Anderson stood up and barked orders to his team. Abort the missile launch. Now, we've got a breach in our system. His officers hesitated for a moment, confused by the sudden change. But Anderson's authority was clear. Do it. Pull all forces back. The command center erupted into action as the team scrambled to abort the launch. The countdown had already begun, and there were only minutes left before the missiles would strike the Xayan ship. Anderson watched the screen, heart pounding, as the abort codes were entered. Back on the Xayan ship, Sarah paced nervously in the control room, glancing at the holographic display. The missiles were still on their way, moving fast through space. Every second felt like an eternity. Finally, Zykor approached her. Your message has been sent. We will know soon if your people have listened. Sarah nodded, anxiety gripping her. She had done everything she could, but it was out of her hands now. All she could do was hope that General Anderson had received the message in time. Minutes passed, and the tension in the room was unbearable. Then suddenly, the holographic display flickered. The missiles' paths began to shift, veering off course. One by one, the icons representing the missiles disappeared from the screen. Sarah let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The attack had been stopped. Relief washed over her, but it was quickly followed by a new sense of urgency. The person or group behind the sabotage was still out there. Zykor turned to face her, his expression unreadable. You have succeeded, human. For now. Thank you for giving me the chance, Sarah replied, her voice filled with sincerity. But we're not done yet. There's someone on Earth who wants war between our species. I need to find out who it is before they strike again. Zykor studied her for a moment, then nodded. We will help you. Our interests align. For now. But understand this. Our patience is limited. I understand, Sarah said, feeling the weight of the task ahead. She had saved the mission for the moment. But the real battle was just beginning. Someone on Earth was trying to ignite a war with the Xayans, and she was determined to stop them, no matter the cost. As the Xayan ship floated silently above Earth, Sarah knew she had to uncover the truth before it was too late. The future of both species depended on it. Sarah Miller sat quietly in the control room of the Xayan ship, staring out at the distant blue-green planet below. Earth looked peaceful from up here, but she knew that something dark was brewing. Someone on Earth had tried to sabotage the peace talks with the Xayans by launching an attack. The missiles had been stopped, but the danger was far from over. She felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She needed to figure out who was behind the betrayal and stop them before they could do more damage. Zykor, the Xayan leader, floated silently next to her, his large, dark eyes unreadable. His people had been patient so far, but Sarah knew that their trust in humanity was hanging by a thread. She couldn't let them down. You seem troubled. Zykor's voice echoed in her mind. I am, Sarah admitted. There's someone on Earth who wants to start a war between us. I need to find out who it is, and fast. Zykor nodded slowly. We will assist you. But understand, if another attack comes, we will not hesitate to defend ourselves. Your people's actions will decide their fate. I understand, Sarah said, her voice firm. I'll stop this. I just need to find a way to gather information from Earth. Zykor gestured toward one of the holographic displays. We have monitored your planet's communications. We can access many of your networks. If there is information to be found, we will help you locate it. Sarah's eyes widened. The Xayans could tap into Earth's systems. That could give her the edge she needed. She stepped closer to the console, feeling a flicker of hope. Can you search for any unauthorized military activity? Sarah asked. Something that would indicate who launched the missiles. Zykor waved a hand, and the holographic screens began to shift, displaying complex data streams and military logs from Earth. The Xayans' technology was far beyond anything Sarah had ever seen. They could access even the most secure systems in seconds. For what felt like hours, Sarah and Zykor combed through the information, searching for any clues. Sarah's eyes scanned the reports, looking for anything unusual. Then, suddenly, she spotted something. A communication log from Earth's military command, flagged as suspicious by the Xayan system. There, she said, pointing to the screen. That's it. Can you open that message? Zykor nodded, and the message appeared on the screen. It was encrypted, but the Xayan technology quickly decoded it. Sarah's heart raced as she read the contents. It was a secret order, directing a small faction within Earth's military to launch the missiles toward the Xayan ship. The order had come from someone high up, someone with the power to override the peace talks. Sarah's stomach churned as she read the name at the bottom of the message. It was General Marcus Caldwell, one of the most powerful figures in the military. He had always been skeptical of the Xayans and had spoken out against the peace mission from the start. But she never thought he would go this far. General Caldwell, Sarah whispered. I can't believe it. This human is responsible, Zykor asked, his voice tense. Sarah nodded, her hands trembling. Yes, he's the one behind the attack. He must have used his influence to sabotage the peace talks. He wants to start a war. Zykor's eyes narrowed, his calm demeanor slipping. This human must be stopped. If he continues his actions, there will be no peace. Sarah took a deep breath, her mind racing. She had the proof she needed, but now she had to act on it. Caldwell was a powerful man with connections. Bringing him down wouldn't be easy, but it was the only way to prevent another attack. I need to get back to Earth, Sarah said firmly. I'll expose Caldwell and stop him from launching another strike. But I'll need your help. Zykor studied her for a moment before nodding. We will send you back. But remember this, Sarah Miller, if your people fail again, we will not hesitate to defend ourselves. You may be their only hope. I won't fail, Sarah promised. I'll make sure Caldwell is stopped. A few hours later, Sarah was back on Earth, standing in the dimly lit hallway outside General Anderson's office. She had contacted him as soon as she returned, and now she was about to reveal everything she had uncovered. The door opened, and Anderson stepped out, his face lined with worry. Sarah, what's going on? You said you had urgent news. I do, Sarah said, her voice steady. It's General Caldwell. He's behind the missile attack on the Xayans. He's trying to start a war. Anderson's eyes widened in shock. Caldwell, are you sure? I have proof, Sarah said, handing him the data she had obtained from the Xayan ship. He sent a secret order to launch the missiles. He's been working behind the scenes to sabotage the peace mission. Anderson looked over the data, his expression darkening. This is serious. If what you're saying is true, Caldwell has committed treason. Sarah nodded. We need to act fast. If he finds out we know, he could try something even worse. Anderson stood tall, his face determined. I'll take this straight to the president. We'll arrest Caldwell and stop his plans. You did the right thing, Sarah. Relief flooded through her, but Sarah knew the fight wasn't over yet. Caldwell wouldn't go down easily, and there was no telling how far he was willing to go to achieve his goals. But for now, she had done what she set out to do. The truth was out, and the path to peace with the Ixtans was still open. But the battle to secure it was only just beginning. Sarah Miller stood in the middle of the Earth military base, her heart pounding. General Anderson had taken the evidence to the president, and they were preparing to arrest General Caldwell for his betrayal. But Sarah knew this wasn't over. Caldwell wouldn't go down without a fight. The tension in the air was thick as soldiers moved around the base, preparing for what could be a major confrontation. Sarah had a sinking feeling that Caldwell had already planned for this. He was powerful and had connections across the military. There was no telling what he might do to protect his interests. Suddenly, her earpiece crackled. It was General Anderson. "Sarah, we've confirmed it. The president has issued a warrant for Caldwell's arrest. We're moving in on his location now." "Good," Sarah replied, her voice tight. "But be careful. Caldwell won't just surrender." Anderson's voice was grim. "We're prepared for resistance. Stay safe, Sarah." Sarah took a deep breath and tried to calm her racing thoughts. She had played her part, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the danger was far from over. Her instincts told her that Caldwell had one final move, and it wouldn't be easy to stop. Suddenly, the ground beneath her shook, and the alarms around the base blared. Sarah's eyes widened in horror. The missile silos. They were being activated. Without thinking, she sprinted toward the control room, her heart racing. If Caldwell launched those missiles, the Ixtans would have no choice but to retaliate. War would be inevitable, and humanity might not survive. When she reached the control room, chaos had erupted. Technicians were frantically trying to shut down the systems, but the launch codes had already been entered. Sarah pushed her way through the crowd, her mind racing. One of the officers looked up at her, panic in his eyes. "We can't stop it. Caldwell locked us out of the system." Sarah felt a wave of fear, but she forced herself to stay calm. "There has to be a way to override the launch. Can we access the Ixtan systems?" The officer blinked, confused. "The Ixtans?" "Yes," Sarah said quickly. "They have more advanced technology than us. They could shut down the missiles remotely if we can get a signal to them." The officer hesitated for a moment before nodding. "We can try, but it'll take time." "Do it," Sarah ordered. "I'll find another way to slow things down." Meanwhile, General Caldwell sat in a secure bunker, watching the events unfold on a large screen. His plan had gone perfectly, almost. He hadn't expected Sarah Miller to uncover his involvement so quickly. But now, it didn't matter. The missiles were ready, and soon they would strike the Ixtan ship. The war would begin, just as he had planned. Caldwell believed that Earth needed to defend itself from the alien threat. He saw the Ixtans as a danger to humanity's survival, and he was willing to do whatever it took to eliminate them, even if it meant betraying his own people. As he leaned back in his chair, a sudden sound broke through the room's silence. An explosion. Caldwell's eyes widened. His security had been breached. The door to the bunker flew open, and soldiers flooded in, weapons raised. Leading them was General Anderson, his face hard with determination. "Caldwell, you're under arrest for treason," Anderson said, his voice cold. Caldwell smirked. "You're too late, Anderson. The missiles are already on their way. You can't stop this now." Anderson stepped forward, his gun aimed at Caldwell's chest. "We'll see about that." Back at the military base, Sarah worked frantically alongside the technicians, trying to buy more time. The Ixtans were their only hope now. If they could send a signal to the ship, they might be able to stop the missiles before it was too late. Suddenly, one of the technicians looked up, his face pale. "We've lost control of the system. The missiles will launch in 2 minutes." Sarah's heart pounded. They were out of time. "Send the signal to the Ixtans," she shouted. "We need their help now." The technician nodded and quickly transmitted the emergency message. Sarah held her breath, praying that Zykor and his people would respond in time. On board the Ixtan ship, Zykor stood in the command center, watching the incoming missile data. His people had been monitoring the situation closely, And now the moment had arrived. He knew the missiles were coming, but he also knew that Sarah Miller had not failed them. A message blinked onto the screen. It was from Earth, a plea for help. Zykor waved his hand, activating the ship's defense systems. The Xayans had the technology to neutralize the missiles before they reached their target, but they had been waiting, giving humanity a chance to correct its own mistakes. Now they acted. Back on Earth, Sarah watched in stunned silence as the missile icons on the screen began to disappear, one by one. The Xayans had done it. They had intercepted the attack. Relief flooded through her, but it was quickly followed by exhaustion. The crisis had been averted, but the damage caused by Caldwell's betrayal would take time to heal. As the alarms quieted and the tension in the room eased, General Anderson's voice crackled through Sarah's earpiece. "It's over, Sarah. Caldwell's been arrested." Sarah slumped against the wall, finally allowing herself to breathe. It was over. The war had been stopped, and peace with the Xayans was still within reach. But she knew this was only the beginning. Humanity had come close to destroying itself, and now it was up to people like her to rebuild trust, both on Earth and with their alien allies. "We did it," she whispered to herself, feeling a flicker of hope for the future.